Hello everyone, this is Shadowcoast, and we are going to talk BattleTech Mech Warrior skills today. I have this opened up, and we're going to review for each of the four primary skill trees, then talk about how you want a mix of skills and what you should consider before you deploy for any given mission. Right now we have 5 out of 8, so we can add 3 more Mech Warriors. I won't get into any spoilers, but later in the game, you can do things that allow you to have more Mech Warriors. I know at least up to 16, potentially even more. Now, it's important to know when you hire on a new Mech Warrior, there is a cost to hire them on, and there's also a monthly recurring cost, their monthly salary you have to pay out. So the more Mech Warriors you add, the more expensive it is to keep your company up and running. So that's really important to consider. So because of that, you definitely want to have more than 4 Mech Warriors because they will get injured, it will take time, and sometimes you just want to crank out contracts because you're burning through cash, you're burning through C-bills, and you need to build your bench so you can afford to take 1 or 2 injuries, or in an unfortunate circumstance, one of your Mech Warriors could actually die. So let's focus on the 4 skills, and we're going to use Shadowcoast, that's my character here, to look at the 4 primary skill trees. So the first one is Gunnery. Gunnery basically increases your base weapon hit. So the higher gunnery you have, the more likely you are to hit your target. This also has implications when you have a precision strike or a called shot. The higher gunnery you have, the more likely those weapons will hit exactly what you're targeting. So that's important to remember. Now there are two skills here. Now the way these, we'll call them skills or talents, work is that you can pick 2 mid-tier skills, and you get there by whatever you level up first, and then 1 tertiary skill, I guess we call it tertiary, but 1 second skill with any given tree. So I leveled this up, I got this first, the other ones went away. Here you see, which I have not leveled up here, I picked these 2, I can pick one of these. There are skill points, and we'll review those for each of these here. So for Gunnery, the first talent or skill in that tree is multi-target. This is an action you can use every time, and it allows you to fire at multiple targets. So for example, if I have 2 medium lasers and I have 2 targets within range, I can set A and B. So A, one laser hits the first target, A, the second laser hits the second target, B. Self-explanatory. The upgraded or second talent or skill within the Gunnery tree is called Breaching Shot. This is a passive ability that applies and attacks with a single weapon, ignore cover and guarded on the target. Cover means that the target has 25% damage reduction. Guarded means the target has 50% damage reduction. This is really important during late game because units, especially assaults, they will guard, they will seek cover, and they already are heavily armored. So we want to make sure our shots are penetrating that and doing the maximum amount of damage when they hit. The second, and so one thing to note, that each pip here, you get a bonus, right? So I think it was, you get plus X%, like 2.5, 3%, whatever it is when you add each one. So every time you skill in something, I don't think I have any open skills here. I apologize. It does give a bonus to the right. So these things, when I level up this tree, I'm not going to get this big beneficial talent or skill move, but I still get passive benefits. So piloting's the next one. Piloting means how good are you at piloting your mech, right? So the second tiered piece here is Evasive Movement. This is a passive move, and this unit generates extra evasion charge from movement actions up to its maximum. So the default maximum is 4. Now with this talent, Shadowcoast can have 5 evasive movements, or evasive charges. We call them ECs, evasive chevrons. Those ECs reduce the probability of the enemy hitting you. So when we see that percentage chance to strike, the more ECs a target has or we have, the harder it is to hit. The second talent, and we're switching to Decker here because he has it, is Ace Pilot. This is also passive, and it allows the unit to move after shooting if it has not moved yet. This is great because I have leveled up Decker to be more recon, although I have put him in a heavy mech, so he can take a hit, and that's because Decker, for some reason, they love to hit Decker. That's a story for another time. Now, it's also important to note here that you get these added benefits as you fill in these pips or points along the way. So when we fully tech out the pilot tree, we get +2 max evasion, so that means he can have 6 evasion chevrons. That's a lot. +25% base melee hit. So the reason I have Decker in a heavy grasshopper, which is extremely mobile, is when he goes in and melees, he packs a punch. Then also +20% max sprint speed. So to reposition and move, we can move that much further, and also make sure we're generating those full 6 evasion chevrons. And finally, we have +2 unsteady threshold. He's really hard to knock down. So that's important to note. Now if we switch back and look at Gunnery real quick, it's just +% base weapon hit as you fill in these different points, up to 25%. And that's a big difference. We have a Shadowcoast in a Hunchback laser boat. So I think it has 8 medium lasers or something crazy like that, and a ton of heat sinks obviously. But when I fire or precision strike a target, I normally destroy whatever I'm targeting. So I like to use Shadowcoast to go for the legs, knock them down, especially if I'm looking to build salvage. Now the next tree is Guts. Guts is really important, and I highly recommend every single mech warrior you have, you put in 4 Guts. Because when you get to 4 Guts, you get +1 health. So that means that the default number, and sometimes they're more or less depending on different characteristics, for a mech warrior is 3 health points. That means they can sustain 3 injuries before becoming incapacitated or dying on the battlefield. That's really important because in a lot of these missions we're going to face a lot of missile barrages, and those missile barrages will injure your pilots. So if you don't want to lose them, which I highly recommend because filling out these trees takes a lot of time and energy, you want to make sure they have good health. So the first skill here is Bulwark. This is passive, and you gain Guarded, which is again 50% damage reduction from the front and the side when you remain stationary. So if you do not move, right, then you gain Guarded. Now, Medusa and Behemoth are my 2, and maybe I'll use Behemoth here because she's fully teched out in this tree, are my tanks. I have them in heavier mechs, highly armored mechs. They're getting up there. They're mostly in brawling mechs. So Behemoth is in a Centurion, a bunch of SRMs, short-range missiles, good melee hit, and a fairly good movement, heavily armored. So when I get up there in their face, this is especially important. Is what I'll do is I might do a double melee. If it's a big mech, I'll run up to him, hit him once, then I'll stand there and hit him again because I know I'm going to gain Guarded. So important to consider. The next skill is Juggernaut. This is also a passive skill. Successful melee attacks knock your target back 1 initiative phase. Now this is really important, especially if you're fighting a light or medium mech who have higher initiation phases. So it's good to knock them back for the next turn so you can focus fire them down and your units can move before they can generate new evasive chevrons or take on Guarded or some other damage reduction ability. Now when it's fully teched out, you have +3 health, so you have a maximum of 6 health points, so she can be injured 6 times, and because I have her up front, she takes a lot of missile damage, melee damage in general. She can take those injuries and won't die, which is great. This is also really important, +30 overheat threshold. This is huge. Now, I have her in a Centurion with 3 SRM2s and 2 medium lasers. That's a really hot alpha, but she can alpha strike 3 times without overheating in a row. That's a massive amount of damage, and that's because that heat threshold is literally maxed out. And finally, -2 recoil penalty. I'll have to look into exactly how that mechanic works to be completely honest with you. Now, the last one is Tactics. Tactics is a variety of different things. I unfortunately have not maxed it out yet. It's the last thing I did. But Tactics has one of the most important moves that you're going to want on any battlefield, and that is Sensor Lock. It is an action, so it takes an action, so you can either Sensor Lock or attack, right? It's a trade-off there. But the selected target, you select a target within sensor range. It has to be within sensor range, which still means they could be read on your screen. You can still sensor lock them as long as they're in that long, large circular area within range. So you select the target, you reveal it so you can see what it is, but more importantly, or equally as important, is you actually remove 2 of its evasive chevrons, or evasive charges. That's really important because on light mechs, they can generate a lot of evasive chevrons, and you're going to want to remove them to increase your hit, right? So this is a key move. It's also very important when you get into 3 skull plus missions, do not charge in because you will get surrounded. You will have 3 medium to heavy mechs, maybe even assaults coming behind you, right? So what you really want to do is you want to move up in a measured fashion, have them at the very edge of your sensor range, sensor lock them, and see what it is before you go in. Because if you're sitting there with an Orion with an AC-20 or like 2 Hunchbacks with AC-20s, and you can see that before they can even target you, you know that you need to disable them from a long range away and have them move towards you. So really important move. The second skill is Master Tactician. This mech pilot or mech warrior, the mech and mech warrior gain +1 initiative and remove 1 bar of stability when reserving. This is huge for assault mechs. We are moving them from the force initiative phase to the 3rd initiative phase. And that's really important because that means we can put a Master Tactician in a more heavily or higher tonnage mech and have them move early. That'll be integral in later missions when you are fighting for a lance of 4 assaults, which you will be doing during the late game. So if we can have an individual move up their initiation phase, so we have an assault doing massive damage before any of the other ones get a go, that gives us the ability to leg one of them, knock them over, or blow them up before we take damage. Really important move. Now in my build here, when you're looking at all the things, I actually did not level up a Tactician right away. Right? I picked here Behemoth, I picked Juggernaut, so guts, so a tank. Here I picked piloting. The reason I picked piloting for Decker, originally he was going to do tactics, but they were beating him up. They were focus firing him down. So I wanted him to build more evasion and stay more mobile, and it's been fantastic so far. Then I did go with 2 gunneries, so Glitch and Shadowcoast. I normally only have one of them deployed at a time in my highest damage dealing mech, which currently is my Hunchback. However, on some missions, like 3 skull, I hit a 3 skull mission, the first one I did, I brought both of them. I just wanted to make sure that if I'm precision striking a leg, that those hits hit, and I'm doing damage and doing consistent damage to disable and take out targets. Right, Medusa is another guts. I'm going to level him up. He's our secondary tank. So we have Behemoth and Medusa. They're both brawlers. I wanted 2 tanks. The reason I have 2 of these guys is because they do get injured a lot. They are the front line. I'm having them in a Centurion that's, heavy up on armor. Or a heavy that's heavy on armor, and they are the first thing I put in front of the enemy, so they are constantly getting injured because they're just being beaten up on. So I do have 2 tanks there. And then Riptide, he is a new addition to the team. You see here, I've been very fortunate, guys. I am playing on a self-imposed Iron Man mode. I haven't lost anyone yet. I've come very close. Like, I've gotten to the point where some of my pilots are down to 1 injury left, and they could be cored, and then I just I retreat them out behind everyone else. I know I'm going to be losing pilots here, and it's not that far off. I know it. And that's why it's important to build your bench. So I did take on Riptide. I'm focusing tactics on him. He will be, once we get an assault mech, we're probably going to put him in there because of this plus initiative phase, which I'm particularly excited about. Now let's talk about general strategy and building your bench. I'm of the opinion I am very conservative when I go into a mission. I move forward in a steady pace. I try to pick the best terrain advantage, so that normally means I'm going to be in cover as much as I can, so tree cover or cover otherwise. I'm going to be on the higher ground when I can, and especially in desert environments or hot environments, I try to focus on staying in water when I can, right? Just straight off between water, which increases your cooling or heat sinks versus being in cover, right? So I try to use the terrain to the best of my advantage, which is really important. Now, in thinking about that, because of that, I will say a couple things for general strategies when you take on a mech warrior. The first thing that I would say is that make sure after you pick your two primary, your two first line moves, when you have a new mech warrior that hasn't trained anything, they have the option of picking all four, right? Like you can level up all four, and then you have to make the decision on which ones you're going to pick. When you're leveling them up, I would say move up. Like, first of all, if you're investing in a pilot, get 4 guts, so you have that +1 health. That's really important. You will take damage, and sometimes the NPCs are just going to say, hey, we don't like that guy, we're taking him out. So Riptide, for example, we added him to the list, and for some reason they switched from hitting Decker to hitting Riptide. I don't know, probably just random. The mech he's in, they viewed him as a priority threat, what have you. So you want to put 4 guts on all your mech warriors ASAP. Then I would recommend focusing in on your evasive movement, or not evasive movement, but your 2 core attributes you're going to pick. And after you get that, make sure you bring everything else up to 4. Because once you bring them up to 4, you get some really cool stuff, right? So for tactics with 4, you get an indirect fire penalty, -1 indirect fire penalty. So if you're obstructed, your hit chances increase, and that's really important because you're going to put yourself in positions where you're shooting through a hill, or like right around a hill or over a hill. You want to make sure that your hit chance is as high as possible. 4 gunnery brings you to 10 base weapon hit. You want to be able to hit your targets. If you are not doing consistent damage, you're going to lose. Right? We're going to want which one has... We have... I don't think I have one that has 4 piloting, right? You get melee hit. This is not... I would say this might not be as important. What's really important is +1 unsteady threshold. You don't want to get knocked down, and you will be facing tanks that have multiple missiles. So the short-range missile carrier has, I don't think I'm exaggerating, 8 to 10 SRM-6s that it can consistently shoot at you. That's crazy, right? And so they're going to be trying to knock you over. So you're going to want 4 piloting to ensure you get that +1 unsteady threshold. And then, so I think we covered all 4. When we get to 5 tactics, we reduce the minimum range. Some weapons have a minimum range restriction. Now, Shadowcoast, he's my main character. If I'm not mistaken, he can get severely injured up to like 100 days or something crazy. However, I do not think he can die. I haven't tested it yet, but I'm pretty sure he can't die. I don't want to test it because I am playing Iron Man mode, and I don't want to. And when I say Iron Man mode, that means no save scumming or anything like that. What happens in the game as I play through happens. So if I lose a mech or a mech warrior, I have to deal with it. And I've come close. Like, there have been missions that you will see where I got surprised, unpleasantly surprised, and I came away with damage where I couldn't do anything for 30 days or 40 days because I was just healing my mech warriors and repairing my mechs. Now let's talk about building the bench. When you deploy, you want to think about the different scenarios you're going to be in. I recommend taking your classic approach of having what I would like to call a tank. So that's a brawler type. So someone that has high guts and high piloting, right? So you can see here, these are my 2 tanks, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Leveling up, piloting, and guts, right? So you definitely want a tank, and you want to put your tank in your most heavily armored mech. I do recommend with your tank doing two things. Putting him in a heavily armored mech that is still mobile. I always want to generate evasion chevrons where I can, right? And sometimes it's good. With your tank, you're going to move them up, get 3 to 5 evasion chevrons, and just guard them. They don't need to shoot anyone. They're taking damage. That is their job. They're tanking. The next thing I'd always recommend is having 1, maybe 2 units, which is our DPS, or damage per second, individuals. And those are really the sharpshooter or skirmisher, right? You know, the way you tech it up is really gunnery. You want someone high in gunnery. So you want someone high in both guts and piloting for your tank. You want someone that's really high in gunnery. After gunnery, you can decide. I would probably go tactics, which I've done here, or piloting, which I've done here. The reason that I picked piloting for Shadowcoast is he was in some much slower mechs, so I want him to be able to sprint. I really wanted that plus sprint bonus, and I also wanted to generate evasion chevrons because after Decker, Shadowcoast was the next most heavily sought after character that I have on the battlefield. So 1 or 2 damage dealers, which are these two, and then you're going to want what we call your Recon Scout, right? And this person has tactics and at least sensor lock, right? Now when you're building this, I personally like for Recon, I think the best build is doing, in my opinion, piloting and tactics. You want them to be heavily mobile, and you want them to be able to use sensor lock to reveal units here. So that's how I normally deploy. I have a tank, I have 1 or 2 damage dealers, and then I have a scout. So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you found this helpful. You know, I think I reviewed everything here. This is how I personally play. Obviously, develop your own playstyle. Let me know about it. I'm interested to hear about people, you know, who want to go all brawler, right? And just have a bunch of people that can take, you know, a lot of hits and can get up there and do a lot of damage, either melee or short range missiles, etc. You know, the beautiful thing about this game is you can play it any way. This, in my opinion, is what makes the most sense, and that has been really successful for me. You know, like I said, I've been fortunate to keep all my main characters. I added Riptide because I want to start building my bench. The last thing that I'll say before I end this video is thinking about when does it make sense to add mech warriors. Well, in my opinion, it's good to always have, you need to have at least 5 or like, you know, at least 5 total. And the reason you want 5 total is that there's always going to be one of your people will most always be injured. It's just the way it is. So I've been in missions where I got hit once. The entire mission I got hit once, and that one missile caused an injury, and then I have a pilot out for 2 weeks. But I want to keep running missions either on the planet or within 14 days, so you want at least 5 at any given time. I personally recommend running 6. I'm very particular about adding people into the company. So I kind of think about names, diversity, some stuff that really has no impact on the game, but I just like to think through. And so let's take a look. There are 2 other things I want to note here. There are unique characters in the universe. So this one is a Kickstarter backer. So I unfortunately did not get into the game. I didn't know about this game until about, call it like 4 or 5 months ago, and then it took forever to come out because I was waiting eagerly. But during the Kickstarter days, if you paid enough, you could create a character in game. So this is a unique character in the game. There are also characters, and we don't see one here, who tend to be more higher level, you know, with skills, and there are different levels. Like he's more expensive because he has more levels. He's more expensive to keep. She's cheaper to keep, this Pyro's cheaper to keep, but doesn't have any experience. There are also characters called Ronins. They're more expensive because they have more skills. Ronins are once in a I guess lifetime mech warrior pilot. So if you hire them onto your team and they die, you can never hire them again. These people, I think, are randomly generated, so we might see Gecko again. Like we might see Gecko. We could hire him. It's not clear to me if they die. They might make another appearance, or maybe another Gecko that stole the same name could pop up with a similar background and story. So keep an eye out. Like if you want to customize your company even more outside of just general skills and talents, there's a lot of things that you could use in this game. I like to try to keep the female male ratio relatively equal. I try to think about diversity, getting different backgrounds in there. So like having poor people mixed with commoners, mixed with these are all poor commoners, but you will have some nobles. If we go back to, and again, this is not this has zero impact on gameplay, guys, so you can stop listening to the video if you have no interest. So Riptide, he's a noble heir, and a mech warrior. You can pause and read through each of these things. Medusa, has different attributes. These attributes can change. We have high spirits. This means that we can use precision strike and vigilance for cheaper morale, which is fantastic. Decker has his different attributes. So this is a great game. The customization for the mech warriors alone is quite a lot. This video is actually a lot longer than I thought. I apologize. I think I went literally a little over bombastic on a few points here, but hopefully you find this helpful. I appreciate you watching the video. Have a good day.